Sea of Red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, Happy New Year. It's 2025, and Matt and I are still doing this, still chatting with Flames fans about what's going on here. So Happy New Year, Matt. How are things going?
Fairly good. Had an excellent Christmas myself, and looking forward to new adventures in 2025.
It should be a good half of the year. We're excited to cover it. Before we get going, I just want to apologize to listeners. Some people reported that our last show, which was put out on December 16th, was not in their podcast feed. It looks like for some reason we had some podcast feed showing it and some weren't. So some, depending on where you get your podcast, you may have seen the 16th episode or you may not have. I've corrected the issue on the back end now. You should get this one just fine. And you may now, if you didn't before, get the show from the 16th as well. So don't fear, we're back and we've sorted out the technical issues. But we're good to go for the future and into 2025. So Matt, let's talk about the games that were, shall we?
Definitely. Let's go.
Going all the way back to that Boston game, which was December 17th. The Flames and the Bruins played, and the Flames ended up losing this one in overtime, 4-3. What were your thoughts?
I thought the Flames actually played this game fairly well, all things considered. Boston is still a very dangerous team, and now that they've made the coaching change, things have started to right for them. They were a little bit inconsistent to start the year under Montgomery. Now under Joe Sacco, they're playing more like the Bruins that we're used to. Of course, Elias Lindholm scores a goal in this one and gets an assist, which he has not had a good year with the Boston Bruins. That was only his fourth goal and 12th assist of the season.
I bet they're regretting that long deal right now.
Yes, definitely. And once it got to overtime, Pasternak finished it, which, you give him any time or space and he will score. So kind of one of those where not much you can do. He was that good in the overtime, and the Flames came up just short.
Yeah, and like you said, I appreciate, I guess, in this one that the Flames were able to match their opponent, right? How often have we seen them sort of not look good against top teams and then play down as well to lower teams? But they, the fact they could hang with the Bruins, I think says that when these guys want to do it, they can.
Well, and the fact that they went to overtime in both games and lost 4-3 in both games, they were right in it till the end. And I think that's a testament to their hard work more than anything.
For sure. Yeah, I think it says a lot there. The next game, the Calgary Flames and the Ottawa Senators played at the Dome. This was way back on the 20th of December. Calgary gets the loss there as well, again in overtime, so getting 2 points in these two games. A 3-2 loss to Tkachuk and the Senators. What were your thoughts on that one?
Calgary, over the last handful of seasons, has not played very well against Ottawa, and I thought this was a fairly even game between the two teams, and you were always looking for just a little bit more spark and a little bit more energy from the team, and it just never really materialized. They did manage to tie the game halfway through the third period with the Huberdeau scoring on the power play, but it's one of those where it just was not quite good enough.
When I was watching this game, I was thinking to myself, it looks like these guys are ready for Christmas.
Yes, very much so.
It wasn't the best game. I wouldn't even say that they were playing down to Ottawa. It just felt like they were a little bit checked out here to me.
I agree.
So, kind of, I don't know, what I expected out of that game. We often see that first game before the break, and even though they had one more after this, it just felt like they were checked out, ready to get home, ready to get on Chicago and finish things. And yeah, it wasn't a great game.
No, it wasn't disastrously sloppy either, but it just was not their best effort.
Yeah, it just felt like as a team they were kind of going through the motions. And then the actual last game before the break, even though the Flames played like it against Ottawa, the Calgary Flames and the Blackhawks played in a matinee game on the 21st. Calgary finally won this one, 6-4 win for the Flames. Now, as much as it's a 6-4 win and that feels great, you've also got to look at this, that, you know what, when you're up by, they were up 4-1 at one point, you should not end up 5-1. That's true. Yeah, I'm just looking here.
Yeah.
You should not end up with a 6-4 final score.
Oh, especially against the Blackhawks. Like, for the first two periods, the Flames just completely annihilated the Blackhawks. Like, they were by far the better team. And, you know, it looked like a good playoff team versus the worst team in the NHL. And then in the third period, Calgary just stopped playing right up until it got to 5-4. And then it's like, oh, we should actually do something. And they scored the empty netter, but it was a bit of a harrowing time for the team, and it was kind of waiting for the equalizer until Backlund sealed it. So, not a good game.
It did get kind of dicey there.
You know, it wasn't Wolf's fault. Like, the goals that he surrendered in the third period, like, the defense just allowed Connor Bedard to set up Bertuzzi twice for tap-ins. Like, you have to tie up his stick or get in the way of those kind of plays, and the defense just let those two players just do their thing, which you just can't do. And the team just, frankly, was terrible in the third period. And if they were playing anybody but the Blackhawks, they probably lose this game in overtime. But, you know, Chicago's not very good, so they managed to hold on for the win.
You know, this is, I think, one of those instances, and we've heard not just this head coach, but multiple head coaches say it over the years, why you need to play 60 minutes, right? The Flames, I think, played 40, said, okay, we're up 5-1, we can take our foot off the gas. When they did, it almost cost them. Like you said, there was a point where I'm like, crap, this is getting close, and the Flames better not lose this one, but this is why you have to play 60 minutes. You don't have to necessarily be offensive for all 60 minutes, but they need to do a better job of keeping the Blackhawks away from their net.
Well, yeah, and, you know, as I mentioned, with allowing Bertuzzi just to stand in front, allowing Bedard to hit his stick, like, you know, both of those goals shouldn't happen if you're playing even somewhat competent defensively. Like, you tie up the guy's stick so he can't receive the pass. And, you know, as good of passes those were from Bedard, like, that's just a scenario that shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Even with our woeful defense. And then the Flames went on their break. They actually had quite a nice break. They were off until the 28th when they were in San Jose. Probably not a bad place to start up after Christmas. Took on the Sharks in that one and ended up with a 3-1 win over the San Jose Sharks. I was hoping that after the Chicago game, they would be able to kind of build on that and not play down to their opponent again. They didn't play down to Chicago. They didn't play down to the Sharks, but I was worried they might. Flames come back after the break with a good 3-1 win. Askarov made 30 saves, and Kadri gets 2 assists in this one. This, to me, is like, this was, again, the Flames looking like they're playing a bad team. And the Flames, I thought, looked fantastic in this one.
Yes, and Askarov kept the score close. It was 2-1 until the last second when Huberdeau got an empty netter. It's one of those where if San Jose was even a little bit better, they'd probably have their goalie win this game for them. But they're just terrible. Celebrini is basically the only thing that the Sharks have going for them right at the moment. And yeah, this was not a particularly great game by the Flames, but it wasn't their worst effort either.
No, I mean, they looked better, I think, than they should have been because of how bad the Sharks were. But
yes,
they sustained the pressure the whole time, right? I
thought it reminded me a lot of the last game of the season last year against the Sharks, where they just were better, period, than the Sharks.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an indication of how good the Flames were playing. It's just the Sharks were just terrible.
And I thought the Flames did a lot of good things right. Like, I thought they played for 60. While there was a lot of talk coming into this one about the battle of young goalies, I don't think that Dustin Wolf got tested all that much. I mean, it was nice to see him versus Askarov, but I think Wolf had a fairly easy night in this one. So, good to get the 2 points against a team that you need to get the 2 points against.
I agree.
And then another back-to-back, the Flames played on the 29th and took on the Vegas Golden Knights. Not necessarily the score they wanted, but not a score that I think tells the story of this game with a 3-0 Vegas win. I thought in this one, Vladar, who was in net, looked fantastic. Vladar saved the Flames in the first. He stood on his head. Wolf played the night before, so Vladar was in this one. And then I think the Flames couldn't get it done in the offensive zone, and that's really why I think this game ended the way it did.
Yeah, if Vladar was not playing as good as he did, like this could have easily been a 7 or 8 goal against performance.
Yeah.
Like there was a number of saves where it's like, how did he actually keep that out? And he was pretty much the only player to show up for the Flames in this game, and frankly, the Flames have not really shown up at all against Vegas thus far this season, getting outscored 8-0 in the 2 games.
I don't know if I'd say they didn't show up. I thought they played okay, but I thought that Vegas is big, and Calgary let them move them around where Vegas wanted them. Like when Calgary had a 5-on-3 for a minute, and then there was a 4-minute 5-on-4. So then the 3 minutes of 5-on-4, Calgary couldn't get anywhere near the net.
Yes.
Right? Like Vegas was in front of them. Calgary was against the board. They couldn't even get one man in front to get the rebounds a lot of times. Like I think that they were doing what they could, but Vegas is just so much bigger, and Calgary's letting them kind of push them around and move them where they want them.
Yes, and that's why for the last handful of years, I've always advocated of getting players that are on the bigger side if you can, through the draft and free agency and such, because you look at a team like Vegas, they're skilled, but the guys that they have that aren't as good are huge and can definitely help box players out, and it just makes it that much more difficult for the team to try to break through. And the Knights have been fairly effective at shutting not just us, but most of the league down this season, as they're, after this game, first in the NHL overall, and now are second because Winnipeg won yesterday.
Yep. So, I guess what we expected coming out of that Vegas game, but the Flames need to do better than that against top teams. And they need to find ways to get in front of the net and get those in if they're going to try to make the postseason this year.
I agree.
So with that now, the Flames sit 5th in the Pacific Division. They played 36 games. Their record is 17 wins, 12 losses, 7 overtime losses for 41 points. Vancouver's 4th place, 42. Edmonton is 45. LA 47, and Vegas, of course, 53 at the top of that division. So the Flames have fallen out of the top 4 there and out of a wild card spot as well. They sit 3rd in the Western Conference wild card at 41. Utah is right behind them at 38, and Vancouver at 42. So still within striking distance, but they need to get some points if they're going to get back into that playoff hunt. Matt, I think the big story since we've talked last, and it's kind of a weird thing to say, is some changes to coaching, but not the head coach. That's kind of where we are with the holiday break. Let's run through this for fans, and then we can talk a little bit about it. Some people know that the Flames brought in Brad Larson in the offseason. He has left the team. He's dealing with a family situation. We don't know what it is. We don't want to speculate about what it is, but he will be gone for pretty much indefinite leave. So the Flames had an assistant coaching opening. They decided to promote, or as they're calling it, kind of a call-up, Trent Cull, who's been the head coach of the Wranglers for, I think, last year and this year. Let me just double-check that. Yeah, he joined the Wranglers in 2023-24, and now interim assistant coach of the Flames. As such, the Calgary Flames have promoted Joe Cirella to interim head coach of the Wranglers, and to fill Cirella's role have put Marty Gellin as an assistant coach of the Wranglers. Any comments on this?
Not really, other than wishing Brad Larson the best with the situation that he's going through, and hopefully it resolves in a positive manner for him and his family. Beyond that, it's nice to see Cull getting promoted. after, having a successful season thus far as the coach of the Wranglers. Beyond that, it's just kind of shuffling deck chairs a bit.
So I have a couple thoughts. Okay, so the Wranglers are the best team in the American League right now. They're having a fantastic season. That's not the kind of team I want to take my head coach away from, right? In a development league, you want your head coach there. I think in some ways them doing that shows that they think this team is so good that, anybody can coach them in a way. And Cirella's been part of that team for a while. He's been with the Flames since Stockton. He's been a member of the Flames organization since 1819. But I'm kind of surprised that that's the way you'd go and you wouldn't bring in a guy with some AHL experience. I was poking around here at AHL head coaches or assistants who have some experience who are unemployed. One possible option, Steve Smith, former Flames captain. He was a head coach last year, a replacement head coach for Hartford, unemployed this year. Steve Potvin was the head coach for the Tucson Roadrunners since 2002 through 2004 and is unemployed. And J.D. Forrest has been a head coach for the Wilkes-Barre Penguins since 2024. Not employed right now. I'm kind of surprised you wouldn't go out and get a guy with some experience if you have such a great AHL year. Or maybe, I understand bringing Cull up to the NHL because you want to do the internal promotion, but Joe Cirella, who's never been a head coach, I don't know, that seems a little weird to me that you give him the reins of the best team in the American League.
Well, I think that you want to have as much verisimilitude with the approach that you're bringing, and bringing out in an outside guy might shake things up more than having guys that have been there throughout the last few seasons and know the game plan and what to expect.
That's true, yeah. Know the players, know what's expected, have that relationship with Husk in the NHL. That's a great point. And you know what? For a guy like Cirella, he's been a coach since '97. He's always been an assistant or an associate coach. Maybe this is the time to say, all right, we're going to give you the reins. Show us what you can do there. And maybe we develop a great head coach. So, yeah, I guess I didn't take that into account, that you're right. At this point, you probably want to keep a guy within the organization there.
Yeah, and realistically, there's just nobody else that fits the bill for being the head coach other than...
Yeah, he's the most experienced guy they have internally. Unless you try to call Daryl back.
Yeah, it's not the ideal situation because, you didn't plan for Larson leaving, but...
Yeah.
For what they have going on.
But even in that case, I would have almost looked at promoting Cirella to the NHL or, Jelena to the NHL and then just leave, Cull and Cirella where they are. Jelena's been an NHL assistant. He was a Flame assistant from 2012 through 2021. I don't know. It's just... I guess it's also that, like we talk about bringing up players who've looked great. I guess you're bringing up Trent Cull to give him that NHL shot. He's been an assistant coach with Vancouver already. But I don't know. I don't want to lose a great Wranglers coach. And I think he's doing such a fantastic job. And I don't want this to be a Mitch Love where, if you can't give me a head coach job in the NHL, I'm leaving.
It could be. It's one of those, you kind of have to sort those things out after the season finishes and hope for the best.
One thing I do like about Cull being brought up is the Flames are starting to rely on some guys that he's worked with the Wranglers. Guys like Coronado, Peltier now in the lineup, Dewar now in the lineup. So I think that Cull knows those players and might be able to help, get the best out of them. And in a lot of ways, I think that bringing your AHL coach up as an assistant, when you have that young talent infusion coming in, can be a good thing because they know those guys. And same thing with Huska and some of the older young guys that we have here who he worked with on the farm. So we'll see how it goes. I guess, it'll be interesting to see what the Wranglers do and if they can still win without, I guess, how critical Trent Cull is to that equation.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. The Wranglers over the past few weeks since Dewar and Peltier have got recalled have not been quite as good, which is not really surprising considering, that's two of your team's leading scorers getting airlifted out of the team. But Just be interesting to see if the Wranglers fall back to earth, much like how the NHL standings are fairly close. Like there's only like 8 points separating first in the league to missing the playoffs in the AHL currently. So, a 5 or 6 game losing streak by the Wranglers, and like they could be like right back in the middle of the pack again.
Sure. Let's come back to the Wranglers at the end of the show. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this happens. I like Trent Cull. He seems like a down-to-earth guy. He's a good interview. He seems like a good strategic coach. So if the Flames have found money in Joe Cirella as a head coach, fantastic. I think waiting until the offseason and see if someone else becomes available or another AHL coach is available. I don't know how often ECHL coaches move up to the AHL. I don't follow it that closely, but I don't think Scott Bird is your guy there either, Rapid City's coach. But yeah, I think they'll look at all the options, and I'm hoping Joe Cirella can prove himself as a head coach, because after working as an assistant since '97, I think it's probably time you give him a shot.
I agree.
Another note here that happened over the break: the Flames made a contract signing Braden Pakal, 25-year-old defenseman Braden Pakal, to a 2-year deal, $2.35 million total, or $1.19 million per year. Nice to see them bringing in a young defenseman. I thought that Pakal really started the season probably as their 7 or 8, and I think he's fought his way into the lineup as an everyday number, top 6 now. I'd say a 5-6 everyday guy. He's young, he's 25, he's found money for the Flames, he was pretty much a free pickup. And for a team that has money, I'm not too concerned about that deal. If it was, the Flames are close to the cap, I don't know if I'd want to spend more than $1 million on this guy, but I think for 2 years, 1.19, why not?
Exactly. Like anything near the league minimum, you're being paid to be a filler player on the team, and come back in 2 years. If you're playing better than that, you'll get a big contract. If you're not, well, hey, you're still a serviceable third, fourth guy or later. Mm-hmm. And, we'll see. And especially with the Flames having so many good young upcoming defensemen, it also gives the team some flexibility in terms of being able to move the player if they need to. So it all the way around, it's a good thing and nothing to complain about.
Yeah, and Pakal's 25. Like a 25-year-old defenseman still has some spot to go up. Right, they've still got some potential there.
Yeah, usually defensemen don't finish developing until like they're 27. So, yeah, he might end up being a top 4 defenseman if he keeps progressing. But the only way to know is to get the shot, which he is, and he's taking advantage of it. So, can't really complain too much.
Yeah, and even if he peaks as a number 6, which I think he probably will, I don't see top 4 in him. I'm okay with that. And, even if he's a number 6 on a developing team, good for him. It's, a full-time spot. But I like Braden Pakal. He makes some mistakes. He's not always the best looking, but I've seen some progression in his game since he became a Calgary Flame.
Yes, definitely an everyday NHLer.
Yeah, and I think right now with a developing team, that's all you can ask for, is a guy who's, making progress.
Mm-hmm.
So, decent signing there. Not the biggest signing the Flames needed to make, but probably the easiest one to make mid-season.
I agree.
Matt, it's New Year's Eve as we record this, or I guess the day of New Year's Eve. Looking back at the 2024 side of the season, can you give one surprise good and one surprise bad that you've seen so far?
Huberdeau is shooting the puck and doing a great job of it.
He's also the number one. He's got the most points in this team, 27 points in 36 games.
Yes, and he's on pace for his third 30-goal season of his career, and he's looking very good this year. He's by far the main reason why this team is actually fighting for a playoff spot instead of where they are.
Who would have thunk that's what we'd be talking about?
Yep.
What's your maybe disappointing surprise?
I think just regression from a lot of the veteran players. The the Colemans, the Sharangoviches, the Kuzmenkos falling back to earth even more than just regressing to the mean. Like a lot of them, Coleman's been better of late, but like Sharangovich has been terrible, which is understandable because early season injuries usually sewer the first half of the year. Like once you're back, I remember one year that like Michael Backlund suffered an abdominal injury in the first week or so of the season, and like it wasn't until like February that he was himself again. And
yeah. On Sharangovich, though, I mean, we've got him for 3 more years. They signed him to an extension for 3 years. I think he will bounce back.
Yes, so same here. And Kuzmenko's just kind of fallen off the face of the earth, so to speak. That would be my disappointment, is like the guys that were kind of like your secondary scoring threats have just evaporated entirely. Thankfully, like guys like Zari and Coronado have picked up a bit of that slack, which is what you want to see from your young players. But this team, I think, would be firmly in a playoff spot if the secondary scorers were actually contributing in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of those names, Coleman doesn't bother me as much. I think that, Coleman...
No, he's bounced back. Like, he was struggling very hard up until about the end of November. And, like, since then...
He was struggling on the score sheet, but I think he still brought a lot of things to the team on the ice.
Yes.
And I don't think you're bringing Blake Coleman in to be a top-scoring guy. Like, I think you're bringing him in for a lot of those other things.
Yeah, like, to me, he's very much like the same kind of role that Curtis Glencross used to be, where, the good two-way guy who chips in every once in a while.
Yeah, just like your Michael Backlund, even.
Yes.
I agree with you about Sharangovich. I think that they probably brought him back too early from his injury, and I think that might have been the thing, too. He still might not be at 100%. I don't know that we ever get the Sharangovich of last year, with being the number 1 scorer on the team again, but I think he will, earn his extension in coming years. And if he needs to get surgery or rehab in the offseason, I think he'll do it. I'm not too worried there, especially in a season when I think the Flames can afford that. Kuzmenko, I don't know. We got Kuzmenko for a reason, right? He was underperforming in Vancouver. He came here and looked good. He's looking even worse than he did in Vancouver, but I'm not surprised that he's not looking good. Like, I think that if he was, Vancouver would have kept him.
I agree.
If they thought that he had that mental fortitude to even get back up there, they would have kept him. Like, we got damaged goods, and we're dealing with the damaged goods.
Yep.
My surprise, I guess, I would have to say Huberdeau for sure. Not expecting him to be the number 1 guy. I would also say Coronado. I think Coronado has really come on to be a better NHLer than I expect him to be this year. He's firmly on that, we'll call it the second line with Coleman, Backlund. I think there's even an argument to be made of putting him with Kadri Huberdeau at this point, but he's looking from a guy who, struggled to make this team last year. I expect him to be a bottom 6 guy, and he's really fought his way into that top 6. And I think is looking great doing it.
I agree. And he's getting to the places he needs to be effective, which, that was the knock on him every time he's been in the NHL prior to this, is that he's just a little bit behind and not fighting to get into the spots where he needs to get to in order to utilize this fantastic shot.
And then one other surprise I want to put in here is Kevin Ball. I think Kevin Ball has looked way better than I thought he was going to. We kind of knew he'd be stuck into the top 4 because, the Flames are weak on D, but I think he's turning into a much better defenseman than we gave him credit for and New Jersey gave him credit for. So that's been a pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah. A less physically impactful version of Robin Regeer, just doing like all the responsible things defensively. You just don't see the tunnel of death yet, but
yeah,
the rest of his game though is reminding me quite a bit of Robin Regeer in terms of being able to shut down the other team, pushing people out of the front of the net and tying up sticks and all the right things that he needs to do to be effective in the league.
Yep. The downside, or the negatives for me, I'll put 2 in here. I think Jake Bean has been one of them. I think, while he hasn't been a full-time NHLer, I kind of expect him to come in here and be that full-time NHLer, and he's been in and out of lineup more than I thought he would be. I thought this might be his time to redeem himself. We're still seeing that carousel of defensemen. I can't even remember the last time we saw Tyson Barrie do anything. We've still got that 5-6 carousel, which we expected. And then the other,
honestly, between Bean and Pahal, basically they swapped what my expectations were. Like, I expected Pahal to be the guy that would be in and out of the lineup and be kind of inconsistent and somewhat bad. And instead that's Bean. And yeah, it's just odd, but at least we hit the mark on one of the two guys.
Yeah, and I mean, we're still seeing Hanley in and out. And I mean, Tyson Barrie's only played 9 games so far for the Flames. Like, I think you and I had kind of penciled him in on that full-time last pairing.
Yes. Is it really surprising me though? Not really.
No,
I think all of Bean, Hanley, and Barrie are all basically the prototypical 7-8 guy, and you just
I agree. I'm not surprised by the Barrie one. I'm just kind of surprised that Bean hasn't been a full-time NHLer on the back end, and then maybe on the front end, I'm surprised with how the Flames tried to deal with their lack of centers. Like, putting Pospisil at center seemed like a bad idea and was proven it was a bad idea, and I think the Flames stayed with him with it too long for it being a bad idea. I think that you're seeing now Zari can do the job, but I'm kind of surprised that they've waited as long as they have to really solve that issue.
Yeah, and Pospisil, like, ever since he's returned to the wing, has basically been the Pospisil we saw last year, which we didn't really see for the first 20 some odd games that he was being used as a center. And it's good to see his impact returning to the lineup. But it's going to be tough for this organization. Like, they don't really have any centers in the pipeline at all at the moment that are of any note. Rory Cairns is the only one that's doing well, but he's short, and as an NHLer probably would play on the wing eventually. It's tough.
And I don't think they need like a top 2 center, but even just a waiver claim I was expecting for, a serviceable NHL center, sort of like the AJ Greer claim from last year, where you just need a serviceable NHL body at center, or, moving a 6th round pick for a center. Like, I'm just surprised that they haven't gone out and found that centerman.
Yeah, and realistically, because the Flames are going to need to spend money regardless this offseason just to comply with the new cap floor, I would not be surprised if they went all out to sign somebody as a veteran just to, shore up for a few years that center position, even though you're going to be relying on guys like Kadri, Backlund, and insert name of new player here. The only way to get center depth is to draft it. Other than, just papering over it with free agents, and it's going to be tough, but I think that the Flames for the next couple of seasons, it's going to basically be let's draft center for the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, and I even think that a guy like Sharon Govich, who we know can play center, putting him there might be a better, a good option. I mean, Zari I think is fine, but I don't know he's the most effective there. He's doing just fine in the role. I guess you've got to decide, do you want to keep him there long term or not? But I just, as we were looking at this roster being formed, it's like, hey, they need a center, they need a center, they need a center, and they haven't found a way to solve it, and that kind of surprises me.
Yeah, and center is the hardest position to fill, just generally, anyway, because there are not very many good centers in the league, and I don't even think you need a good one. You just need an NHL one. Like, I'm sure that the Flames, the Flames are carrying 8 defensemen right now. Like, I'm sure they could have flipped a Tyson Barrie or Joel Hanley for an AHL tweener or something like that. Like, another guy that could have just been that 13th forward who could play center or wing when they need him to. But it just feels like they've got no depth past their top 4. Yeah, and the thing is that a lot of teams are having the same kind of issues that So it kind of makes sense. And like teams don't really want to shed centers. Like we saw Cole Schwint getting claimed off waivers. Like it's hard to find like where even a team like Vegas is like, sure, we'll take that guy as filler depth because why not? And
yeah, and with Justin Kirkland getting his NHL shot at 28, you're talking about needing a bigger center. I would not be surprised, just out of the sheer number of centers they don't have, if they need a centerman, Clark Bishop get called up. He's got 24 points in 30 games right now for the Wranglers. I think he's probably your next call up if you just need that veteran guy who can play a couple games.
I agree.
I don't think Morton's ready as much as a lot of people like him, and those are really the top three centers down on.
Yeah, the only reason you'd call Morton up is like if you're post trade deadline and you just want to give a kid a shot. Which you're just auditioning guys for next year at that point anyway.
Yeah, well, and even before that, Kieran's got to come up before Morton.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll see what they do there, but those are my good and bad. We're not quite at the midpoint of the season. We're getting close. So you and I made a whole bunch of predictions for the season that we'll look at when we hit that 41 game mark, which I think will be probably next week, if not close to. So we'll see how we were looking at the beginning of the season. But I think if I had to sum up the surprise of 2024 so far, it's that Huberdeau looks like an NHL player again.
Yes, and he's playing at the level of about a $7 to $8 million player, which that's actually quite good. And is he overpaid still? Yes, but he, instead of being like a $4 million player the last 2 years, he's actually playing a very well-rounded game, and like I'm actually more impressed by his defensive game this year than his offensive game, which is saying quite a lot. Like he's really turned into an effective 200-foot player instead of just being the guy who passes in the offensive zone to find the streaking forward.
Yeah, and yes, he's overpaid. I think, though, that contract serves a purpose right now at the salary floor. So while, he might be overpaid, it's a needed contract for the Flames. And I totally agree with what you're saying about him playing off the puck. Like, he's just doing so much better when he doesn't have the puck on his stick. He seems like he has better awareness. I'm not saying he's a great defensive player, but I think he's learning how to get to where he needs to be. I think he's, in the right spot, and he's thinking a lot better about how to get the puck back on his stick in the offensive zone.
Yes.
Well, going back to the Wranglers here, we were talking a little bit about them. They're still number one in the league. In the Pacific Division, they have quite a lead. They're at 43 points after 31 games. San Jose Barracuda are second with 35 or 36 points. The Hershey Bears, the Rochester Americans, and the Grand Rapids Griffins are the top of their divisions, 41, 41, and 39 points respectively. This has been a fantastic year for the Wranglers. As you mentioned earlier, they've been decimated recently, getting Dewar and Peltier brought up. Rory Cairns scoring better than a point a game, 32 points in 31 games. Dryden Hunt has 26 points in 29 games. And Clark Bishop, 24 points in 30 games. Even William Stromgren, 22 points in 30 games. Like,
yeah, he's come on. Like, he was very bad at for the first month and a half of the year, but like he's really turned it on.
He has, yeah. And it's fun hockey to watch. Like, if you've got Flow Hockey or if you've got an afternoon, grab some cheap Wranglers tickets. It's fun to watch. And I love to see the Wranglers being so dominant. I think there's been a lot of talk about the Flames not having a great system. And again, I don't know how much of this is Trent Cull versus the players. We're about to find out. But, I love that the Flames are so dominant. I would love to bring home an AHL trophy for this team.
Yes.
And it's awesome that it's kind of the surprise guys. Like, if you would have told me going into this season, Rory Cairns is going to lead the Wranglers, I would assume that meant nobody else was scoring. Like, I love to see those surprise stories, and that's what I think a good development system allows.
Yes. And I also want to just touch on the Flames prospects a little bit. I was looking at the OHL scoring race yesterday. And in the top 20, I noticed 4 familiar faces. Luke Misa, Henry Muse, Jacob Battaglia, and Zane Perek are all in the top 20 in OHL scoring. with Muse actually leading all defensemen in scoring in the OHL, and Prek only a couple points behind him. It's to see a bunch of Flames prospects kicking some butt in the OHL. Anytime your guys are amongst the league leaders in points, that's good for their development. So,
I found it pretty fun. Go ahead.
It's just good for their development overall anytime they're contributing appropriately on the score sheet.
I found it funny after Canada got beat by Latvia so handedly in the World Juniors that Zane Parekh liked that story, and I'm like, wow, that's a bit of shot in the face considering he didn't make the team.
Well, to be fair to Parekh, he's damn right. Like the amount of players that Team Canada left off, like it was stupid of them, and like they can't score, and you left 4 of your best scorers at home. Well, it's kind of on you that like your team's terrible in the World Juniors because you literally left 4 of your best players off the team for no reason.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you said, you made your bed and now you got to lie in it.
Yep.
So Matt, let's close off the show this week by looking ahead at our January schedule for the Flames. The Flames have one more game in December. We won't talk about that one, and then we move on to January. The Flames start the month by hosting for the first time ever the Utah Hockey Club on the 2nd. They have Nashville after that. They've got a number. We won't talk about every single game here. We'll let fans look them up. There's a lot of games, but they've got one big road swing in the middle, but a lot of home games. This is a season when I look at it where the Flames are playing a lot of, I would say, poor teams and Eastern teams, and teams that you can afford to lose and not give up a point. But I think there's going to be some must-win games here. The Flames play LA twice in a week. I think you got to win both of those. They're playing Winnipeg on the 18th. That's a must-win. I think Winnipeg again on the 26th is a must-win. Overall, I think if the Flames can play the way we've seen them play pretty consistently, this shouldn't be a hard month for them. What's your overall thought on it?
Yeah. Well, this certainly is the make or break month for this team.
It is.
And at least they have a fairly even breakdown of like good teams and bad teams. Like it's not the easiest or the most difficult schedule, and thankfully like the games are kind of interspersed with each other. Like the first 3 are against bad teams, the second 2 are against good teams, the next 3 are against bad teams.
And no really terrible road trips either.
Yeah.
Like, their first road trip is Anaheim, LA. That's an easy trip. Chicago, St. Louis. That's not too bad of a trip. And they play St. Louis on the road twice. And then this is the second time we've done that in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a little weird. We'll just hang out and then...
Well, that's it. I know it's happened before, but it's just... And it's St. Louis both times. I don't know why, but it's just kind of weird. You play them on the 14th, you hang out. I guess you see the bridge there, and then you play on the 16th, and then head off to Winnipeg. And then the last trip is Minnesota, Winnipeg. Again, not a bad trip.
Yes. So as much as it's there are certain games that are going to be tough. Like the Flames can hold their own if they play well against the poor teams and steal a few games against the good ones.
I feel like the Flames have to do better than 500 this month. 500 is going to be a disappointment. I think they've got to be about 650 for their wins.
Yeah, there's 14 games. They need at least 9 wins out of the 14.
Yeah. And I think 9 is doable.
Yes.
I think, like you said, this is an important month. I see this team slowing down at the end of February after the break for the Four Nations Cup, especially considering nobody's really playing for it for the Flames, and they're all going to go on vacation. So I think you've got to rack up some points early to accommodate for that lull when you get back in February.
Yes, and when we were talking at the beginning of December, we said that the Flames, we were kind of expecting a dozen points for the team as the high side, just because of the amount of bad teams and how we usually play down to them. And thus far they have 13 points with 1 more to go. So like they're actually doing fairly good this month.
And they played well against the bad teams. I mean, we talked earlier this episode about Chicago. We talked about San Jose. Like they played well and, well enough in both those games.
Yes, and like it's going to be tough for this team to hang on, and like they're not in a playoff spot right now, but they're close, and it's just going to be as easy for them to fall off completely. So, if they want to stay in the conversation for the playoffs, like they have to keep it going, and there are going to be 0 easy games the rest of the way. And it'll be nice to see if this team can, through gumption and hard work, actually pull it off.
The other thing we have to remember here, too, is like injuries are going to start to mount. And the Flames have been pretty fortunate so far with injuries. But one key injury to this team, and I think the whole thing falls apart. So again, get your wins quick so that you can build up those points to give yourself that buffer.
Exactly.
So we'll see what they do in this month, but I'm excited. I love that we're getting Utah for the first time. I'm always fascinated when new teams come to town. I don't know why. I've been to every new team since the Mighty Ducks when they first come to town. So I always love going to those games and being part of that history. But yeah, kind of a weird, that St. Louis road trip is a weird trip. And I don't know why they're doing that, but it's happened a few times now.
Yeah, usually, like I remember, I think the last one was we were in Colorado for 2 in a row.
I know it's happened in St. Louis before, but yeah, I think Colorado too. And I mean, I'm just looking at the schedule. I know it's not as easy as this, but they play Chicago, St. Louis back-to-back, then get a day off and do St. Louis. Why not do 2 St. Louis back-to-back and then go off to Chicago?
Yeah, or St. Louis, Chicago, St. Louis.
Well, I don't think you want to fly in and back and in and back. Like I think if you're going to do it,
it's just bizarre.
Like that would suck you. That would suck even more to fly to St. Louis, play them, fly to Chicago, fly back St. Louis. If you're there, you might as well just stay there.
Well, like even going to Winnipeg, then coming back here, then like a week later going back to Winnipeg. It is also a little weird. Like I think that overall they could have adjusted the schedule a little bit.
Yeah, and we have to remember there's a lot of other things going on in these buildings and stuff like that too.
Yeah, it is just a very weird month.
It is. So hopefully the Flames can get 650. And for those that don't know what that means, they were, when we say 500, 650, that's the percentage of wins they'd need. So they'd need to win 65% of their games this month, which I think is totally doable if they play the way we know they can. Do you see the Flames deviating from their kind of every other schedule for the goalies this month?
Not really. I think that you might give, like if a guy has like a shutout, you might give him a secondary game, but I think that the spacing of the games is well enough where I think you can go back to the every other. Other than the one back-to-back with Chicago and St. Louis, and the one with Anaheim and LA, like there are not too many.
No, and then the Flames get a weird 4-day break. How often does an NHL team get a 4-day break?
Yeah. January is weird. Just, straight out.
Well, I'm surprised there's a 4-day break with another 2-week break coming up. Like I'm surprised they're not trying to compress stuff. But again, we don't make the schedules.
Yes.
So we'll see how that goes, but let's look ahead at the games that are coming up for this week, and let's make our predictions. Last week, or I guess the show before Christmas, you won again. You're doing really well this year, 3-1 right now for you. You thought we'd beat Chicago, San Jose, and lose to Ottawa, Boston. I thought we'd win Ottawa, Chicago, and lose San Jose. Or I thought we'd win Ottawa, Chicago, San Jose, and lose to Boston. So you won that one.
Yep. For the amount of points we got, you were correct. For the games, I was correct.
That's right. So if we look ahead now, we have one more game in 2024. That's the New Year's Eve game against the Vancouver Canucks, 7 o'clock start time at the Dome. Then on the 2nd, again in the Dome, the Calgary Flames host the Utah Hockey Club for the first time, 7 p.m. start time. And Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada, the late game, taking on the Nashville Predators in the Dome. 3 games at home. What do you think, Matt?
I think they go this week with 4 points, beating Utah and Nashville, losing to Vancouver.
As much as I don't want them to lose to Vancouver because he gives up points in the division, Vancouver's a good team this year. See, and Nashville, like you and I debated this last time too. They have such problems against Nashville.
Yeah. All three of these games are kind of in the coin toss variety. Like the Flames have not done well against the Coyotes of late. Now it's Utah, but same team. So
okay, I'm gonna argue this because I argued it with somebody over Christmas. Not the same team. They're an expansion team that purchased the hockey assets of the Coyotes. I had somebody quiz me on the number of expansion teams, and I included them, and they got angry at me. I said the number of relocation teams in the NHL. So they're not a relocation; they're an expansion team.
Yes, but the players are the same, so that's what I was referring to.
Okay. Yeah, I got somebody who told me I didn't know what I was talking about, and I said, well, in technicality, I do. It's a new franchise. So I'm just looking here. How did the Flames do last time they played Utah? They lost 5-1. Yeah.
Like, I don't think... Like, that was the one game that Wolf was actually just terrible in. So, like, that game, the loss was mostly on Wolf's bad performance. But like even in past years, the Flames have not done very well against the Coyotes either. So
no,
how would you say like them and Nashville? It's kind of like the same thing where like both teams like it's fairly even and can kind of go either way.
All right, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I'm going to say they beat Utah, lose to Nashville and Vancouver.
Okay.
Not what I want to happen, but what I think might happen. And if they do, they're starting the season or they're starting the month with a bit of a deficit, but I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. We will talk to you again after those 3 games, and hopefully you're right this time and you're up on me 4-1, but they need a strong start to 2025.
Yeah, and like the season can get away from them very quickly if they don't keep it up with the winning. And like they're outside of a playoff spot now. It's not very far for them to go into the bottom 10, bottom 5 if they fall off the wagon for any extended period of time. So hopefully the boys can keep it up and have a good start
and
to the
even
year.
if they are in the bottom 5, again, like this is a year where I really don't care, right? Like if they're in the bottom 5, great, they get what they need. If they're in the playoffs, great, they get playoff experience. Like as a Flames fan who's looking at this as part of that rebuild, I think either way is okay. You just have to play your cards a little bit differently.
Yes, I agree.
We'll see where they are next week, Matt, when you and I chat again.
And as always, go Flames go, and Happy New Year.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.